Ladies Love Politics has been covering the Libertarian National Convention all weekend. This year's theme was Become Ungovernable. Cute as that is, what does it actually mean to be ungovernable? Seems like we've lost the meaning along the way. Especially since COVID, Americans have basically bent over and said,
"Thank you, sir. May I have another?"
And since we've forgotten to become ungovernable, and I can't say libertarians have necessarily led the charge, let's take a quick trip down memory lane. Here are 4 ungovernable moments in American history you probably didn't learn about in school. Coxey's Army, March to July, 1894. Coxey's Army was a ragtag team of angry Americans. They were often described as vagrants or a hobo army. The Panic of 1863 caused economic woes to ripple across the country. What were they asking for? It was simple. They wanted legislation that would create jobs. Nearly 400 men marched from Massillon, Ohio, to Washington, D.C. The trek took 5 weeks. Around 10,000 people watched them as they descended upon the Capitol building on May 1st, 1894. When police attempted to block them, the protesters climbed the fence. They were then arrested for trespassing on the Capitol lawn. This protest was considered the first March on Washington. Coxey never did get to address the crowd. However, he came back for rallies on the 20th and 50th anniversary of the march, where he was able to speak to the crowd. Although the march didn't yield any immediate results, it did lay the groundwork for future protests. The Women's Suffrage Parade, March 3rd, 1913. The Women's Suffrage Parade was January 6th, but with long skirts. Think the Viking helmet dude was wild? Well, the suffrage parade was led by a female lawyer riding a white horse. Behind her was 9 bands, 4 mounted brigades, 3 heralds, and around 24 floats. On March 3rd, the day before President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration, more than 8,000 women showed up to march from the U.S. Capitol to the Treasury Department. The first section of the procession was led by women from countries who had already had the right to vote. Next were a group of suffragettes who had been fighting for the right to vote. The third section was working women who dressed in their occupation's uniform. Next was a space for state delegations. Finally, they made space for male supporters who supported female suffragists. Before long, the parade encountered thousands of spectators, mostly men who were in town for the inauguration the following day. Things got a bit rough. The crowd tried to clog the road so the parade couldn't squeeze through. They heckled the women, tripped them, and pushed them. The words that were spewed at them were described as indecent epithets and barnyard conversation. The police seemed not to care much. In fact, some officers even joined in on the harassment. Reportedly, 2 ambulances drove back and forth from the parade to the hospital for 6 hours. Drivers and doctors had to fight through the crowd to reach the injured. More than 100 marchers were hospitalized. The Secretary of War even got involved. He authorized a troop cavalry from Fort Myers to step in and calm things down. Helen Keller was slated to speak at the event, but she was so jostled from the day, she just couldn't do it. The parade eventually reached its destination. Despite all the raucous and rowdy behavior, the event was described by the New York Times as, quote, one of the most impressively beautiful spectacles ever staged in this country. The Bonus March, May through June 1932. The Bonus March was a group of 10,000 to 25,000 World War I veterans. Along with their families, these men descended on Washington, D.C. What did they want? Well, they were promised bonuses for their service during the war. However, these bonuses were not scheduled to be paid out until 1945. Given the economic distress caused by the Great Depression, the soldiers wanted their bonuses now, not later. These men moved into abandoned shacks below the Capitol and piled into shanties and tents along the Anacostia River. The House passed a bill authorizing payment, but the Senate rejected it. This caused weeks of protest and borderline riots to pop off. General Douglas MacArthur pushed out protesters and destroyed their encampments with tanks and tear gas. Eventually, Congress approved $100,000 so protesters would leave. This bonus army would rise up again the following year, causing the creation of the Civilian Conservation Corps that helped veterans find employment. In 1936, Congress approved $2 billion in veterans' benefits. In 1944, the Bonus Army's work came to fruition. The GI Bill of Rights was passed. March on the Pentagon, October 21, 1967. The March on the Pentagon was a pushback to the unpopular Vietnam War. The march started at the Lincoln Memorial. Nearly 75,000 protesters gathered for a rally. About half of them marched across the Memorial Bridge to the Pentagon. Military police, federal marshals, and U.S. Army troops stood their ground in front of the Pentagon, holding rifles and wearing riot gear. Most of the protesters were cordoned off, but some broke through and entered the Pentagon. At the end of the day, nearly 700 people were arrested for various acts of civil disobedience. As we approach Election Day 2024, what will you do to become ungovernable? If there's another pandemic, will you comply? Will you get another booster? Will you get a different shot? Will you mask up? Will you shut down your business? Let me know in the comments. Mark your calendar for July 25th through 27th. Ladies Love Politics will be attending the Bitcoin 2024 conference. Join me online as I cover the event, or grab a ticket and see for yourself the wonderful world of Bitcoin. Ladies Love Politics is a proud media partner of Bitcoin 2024. In the meantime, be sure to follow the Ladies Love Politics channel on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.